Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our next session of the 2024 EA Global Summit. I'm Ryan Schmier from Spark Services North America, and I am pleased to introduce our next speaker, Steve Householder, who is actually he's one of the principal consultants and architects at Sparks North America, who's going to be talking to us today about how to take your architecture models and extend them beyond the Sparks platform into the tools that your project teams use, specifically SharePoint, Microsoft Teams, and Confluence. So before I hand it over to Steve, a couple of housekeeping uh, items. If we have time, we will have a live Q&A at the end. So put your questions in the Q&A window within the GoTo platform. If we don't get to everything, you can go ahead and put them in the Slack channel, and we will follow up after the session. If you're watching this video on YouTube, please feel free to reach out to sales@sparksystems.us, and we can arrange to get your questions answered for you. With that, let me hand it over to Steve, and we can get the party started.
All right,
Steve?
there we go. Thank you, Ryan, for the introduction. Hopefully people can see the slide there with the Sparks North America emblem and the title. Good. All right. So as Ryan said, this is how to kind of share your model content with the rest of the world beyond the folks that are actually in Enterprise Architect. So with that, let's take a look at the next slide. Today we'll review the problems, the solution options, and the solution options will break down into publishing as links, publishing with the plugin, using sharing using an app, and then finally the two last ones, I have an asterisk next to them. They're not really part of this topic, but if we have some time, if people have questions that might come up as to how to aggregate and sync or connect to external data via Sparx Enterprise Architect, and then custom integrations. So the value of your EA model content to your organization is not so much how it's produced, but rather how it's shared with various stakeholders within your organization and what sort of value they get from that information that you're sharing. So in Sparx and the Prolaborate environment, EA provides a very nice collaborative modeling environment for your architects and modelers, folks that are in there actually creating the content. And there's things like model mail and discussions and things that are actually in Sparx EA that'll help enable or facilitate that sort of communications amongst the modelers and architects. Prolaborate then, of course, provides a collaborative environment for stakeholders beyond those that are actually in Sparx Enterprise Architect. Those are people that don't want to see how the content, don't want to get into the nitty-gritty details of how you're modeling and creating and diagramming the content, but rather need to have a more curated and focused sort of perspective on what it is that's important to them to be able to make informed decisions about where they want to go next with either the business or the technology or the application or data layers that they have responsibilities or interest in. So the problem comes, of course, is that getting your EA model content to that broader audience in a timely manner is kind of difficult. Also, getting your shared content in a current and keeping it current and up to date is also difficult, especially if you're not letting them into Prolaborate or if you're not encouraging them to use Prolaborate or Sparx Enterprise Architect. And then finally, meeting your audience where they currently go for their information. Most companies, when they implement the Sparx Prolaborate environment, usually have that their content stored somewhere else. And the somewhere else is usually in a knowledge management tool like Confluence or SharePoint. And then with their collaboration, so reviews and discussions and so forth are happening in things like a communication tool and sharing tool like MS Teams. So, once you implement the Sparx EA and Prolaborate environment, it's kind of hard to get people to just sort of quickly jump over to that when they're already used to, something else. that they're more familiar with. So this is going to be a way to sort of help you use Confluence, SharePoint, and Teams as a way to share your model content and not have to reproduce it or refresh it in this copy and paste sort of scenario that is the current kind of conundrum that people encounter for now. So the solutions that we're going to look at today, of course, is publishing via using links. So this is, and then publishing using a plugin, and then sharing the app using using an app, or sharing the content using an app. So we'll start with the publishing using links. So the problem, of course, is copying and pasting diagram or model content from the source system, in this case either Sparx itself, and then copying and pasting it into SharePoint or Confluence. It can be done, but of course, as soon as you copy and paste it in there, it's stale. Any updates to that diagram in Sparx are not going to be reflected in that pasted image in either SharePoint or Confluence or other web portals. So what we can do with the publishing as links is using iframes or HTML support. You can use that as a way to embed the links to those diagrams. So of course, getting started to do that, you need to have Prolaborate and the iframe capability available to you as a resource to be able to implement this. So let's go ahead and take a look at how we can do that. And in this case, I'm going to once I get to my environment here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is switch over to, in this case, SharePoint. Well, first of all, I'll start and say, to be able to do this, you need to kind of set up a couple of things initially. Like the slide said before, Prolaborate has to be installed, so you have to have that up and running. And then you also have to have the ability to use iframe. So there's some configuration that has to happen as well to be able to make this available to outside users. And that's done in Prolaborate, and that is to enable embedded links to be shared with the outside world. So let's take a look at how we can do that in Prolaborate, or excuse me, in SharePoint, where I'm copying and pasting an embedded link to of a diagram in there. So here is a diagram that has been imported using an embedded link, and below is the same diagram using just a copy and paste scenario. So you can see it looks the same, similar, but there's some slight differences, and that's because I've made some changes up here. And I'll show how it's even more dynamic when I actually go into Sparx and edit it and make some really significant changes that are going to be would be difficult to or cumbersome to update by, again, removing this diagram from here and then copying and pasting the new version of it. So how do you implement it? Well, you have to have, of course, your SharePoint site and Prolaborate need to be able to communicate with each other and see each other. So they have to be visible to each other. And then once you have that, you can just go ahead and edit your content in SharePoint. And we're going to go ahead and add yet another diagram in here in addition to the one that we already have. So I will go back to Sparx to show you which diagrams we're going to be bringing in. Let me open them up here. I'm just going to go to the T demo. So I have three integration diagrams that have been produced. And the first one that we saw just flash up here is this one for the activation system. So the activation system and its integrations with other systems that have been inventoried in our repository are there. So we can use that as a way to kind of take a look at what's there. So what I did with the first one is I just took the diagram and said copy. I went back to SharePoint on my diagram here, and I'm going to just add another section, and then in that section add a new element. In this case, I'm just going to paste the one column. There we go. paste the diagram. So there it is, and it's going to look, like the diagram we see in Sparx. Again, it's not dynamic. If I click on it, it's just once I publish this, if I click on it, it's just going to expand the diagram into its own window to give you a better visibility to it. But it's not dynamic at all. Let's go ahead and add another one here. In this case, I'm going to add it as an embedded link. So if I go in here and say I want to have an embedded link, there is where I can add that information. So how do I get the embedded link to that diagram? I'm going to go to that to a new diagram. In this case, I'm going to go to the billing system diagram, and there it is. So it looks just like the one here in Sparx, because it is the same one. It's just now being rendered in Prolaborate. If I go to the share, I can take and say, go ahead and copy the link that I want to share it with, and then I can use that. In this case, I want to use an embedded link. So copy that, go back to SharePoint, paste it, and update it. And you can see there's my new diagram. I'm going to publish this so that I can interact with it. And again, we're going to go and look at the other diagrams. These are the two that were just copied and pasted in there. Just clicking on them just shows you the diagram. Doesn't do anything. If I go to the one that I embedded, if I click on any of the elements in the diagram, it will dynamically pull up the properties sheet that you would see in Prolaborate. So you can get some additional information about it and so forth that would be above and beyond what you'd see. Now, that's pretty cool, but the best thing about it is if I made a change to the diagram, so I'm just going to add another system to this diagram and make a relationship to it. So I'm going to go to my catalogs, go to my application inventory, and I'm going to incorporate the payroll system and have an integration with that to this one. So there's payroll. Make sure I've got the right toolbox open. And it's TAPM, so I can use the quick link and make the appropriate integrates connector with it. I'm also going to set the color of the connector based on some properties that connector has, based on the T meta model that an MDG that was created. In this case, I'm going to say the integration type is going to be a web service. So then using the legend here, it's going to color that connector accordingly. If I go ahead and save this, I'll go back to Prolaborate, and I should look at that same diagram. If I refresh, actually I'm in SharePoint, I want to be in Prolaborate. If I refresh the diagram here, you can see it updates. I go to SharePoint, do the same thing here. If I refresh it, I will see it update and change to be the new diagram, or to be the new version of that diagram that I just updated. So I didn't have to copy and paste and put it back in here. I just updated it and refreshed the screen. And now you see, once we get down to the diagram, that it has the payroll and the connection to the billing system in there. So make the change in one place, refresh the two environments, in this case, Prolaborate, or in this case, SharePoint. I'm able to see the new changes and updates in there as well. So a lot easier to maintain than, coming in here and having to, remove this diagram and put in, copy and paste the new one in there and update it. It'll never go stale because it's always going to be linked to the diagrams that you have in your Sparx environment. All right, so that's that method. Let's go back to our slides and look at the next one. So publishing with the plugin. The problem is the same, the idea of copying and pasting, and the applications that we can support this new publish with a plugin are going to be, again, Confluence and SharePoint. We'll use Confluence for this example to show you how it works. Getting started, or what's required to do it, of course, Prolaborate needs to be installed, but then either the Confluence or the SharePoint plugin installation and configuration also has to happen. So there's a few steps in that need to take place. Let's take a look at how that gets executed. So first of all, we need to make sure that in Prolaborate we have set up the integration application access management, and that's done in Prolaborate. If I go to the portal settings, there is the integrate application access management option, and here's where I can add different applications that I want to interface or have access to. In this case, I have a Confluence one already set up, so you can see what it looks like. I have the name. I have the application ID that's going to be used. I have the scope. In this case, it's OpenID and authorization using client credentials, etc. So there's a number of things that need to be set up, and I will leave links to the documentation from Prolaborate that has even more details on how to do this. But this is one of the things that is required for this plugin to work. So once that's done, then you can go back to we'll go back to our repository that we're in question. Then the next thing we need to do is within Confluence, we need to make sure that the plugin is already added. In this case, I'll show you how it already has been done in my instance here, but I'll show you how you can get to it to be able to do that. When you want to add the Prolaborate plugin, go to the Confluence administration icon, go ahead and under to manage apps, and then here's where you can locate apps. You can see I already have it installed, but if you don't have it installed yet, go ahead and go to find new apps, and just search for Prolaborate, and there you'll see it. I have this one, Prolaborate 4, installed, and that's the one you probably want to use as the most recent version of it. So I don't need to go here, I've already got it. Let's take a look at some of the configuration that's necessary for it. Let's go back to Manage Apps. If I look at it here, expand it, you'll see some of the details, including how to configure that app. And there's a few settings, and again, I'll send the documentation that'll help with that. So of course there's a protocol, there's the server location of your Prolaborate, the port that it's using, the client that we just put in the when we set up the configuration in the portal settings in Prolaborate needs to be there. And then you generate a token or a client secret that's used, and then also a user ID. In this case, we use the admin account to be able to access and create and get back and forth with the content. So a little bit of setup, but it's not too onerous. And once you have it connected and set up, it's pretty easy to work with. So how does it work when you actually get into Confluence? And there's a similar sort of plugin for SharePoint. We won't go into the details of that, but it's essentially the same thing where you pull down the app and you configure it within both Prolaborate and the tool. So let's go back to our T application integrations diagram page. And how do we add this information here? I'm going to edit this, and I'm going to remove, or I'm going to add another one. I'll add the billing system because we have the activation system in here. So I'm going to add a new element by just saying add. And in this case, I want to add a Prolaborate reference. So I pick that. Now I can search, and it's if I had connections to more than one repository, I could select which repository I want to go to. In this case, I just have it set to our Galaxy demo. And then I can go and say I want the billing system search for that, and then it'll search for all the diagrams that are in there with that in their name. So here's the one that I want. Then I have some options here that I can bring in a child table, which will show a table below the diagram with all the elements in that are on the diagram in that table. It'll also show Prolaborate links or diagram path and borders if you want to display that. I'll leave all these checked so you can kind of see what it looks like, and then we can maybe make a couple adjustments to it to see how that affects it. So I'm going to go ahead and say select this one and insert, and then you'll see it pop up here below once it gets inserted, or it should. Maybe I didn't do something right here. Try it one more time. So again, look for the Prolaborate plugin, search for billing system. There it is, selected, and insert. There we go. So there it is. And then notice it's got 4 different elements. Actually, it's got 5 different elements because a legend is also considered an element. And they're displayed here below in the form of these elements in the table below. If I went ahead and edited this and said, don't show the table, so I uncheck that box, then you'll see that that table goes away and it's just the diagram and some attributes about the diagram. And notice how it had, it's the most recent one where I had added the payroll update there. So let's go ahead and update our page here by just saying update, and there it is. Now let's go ahead and make a couple of changes to our billing system just to see that in fact that it does update dynamically with Confluence. View that. I'm going to just not do too much. I'm just going to rearrange some things on the diagram, not make any drastic changes, but enough that it's going to be noticeable, right? I'll go ahead and save this. I'll go back to Confluence, refresh the page, and then of course there's no copy and paste, but rather I just see the changes and the updates happen dynamically. The other thing that's nice about this is that I can click on any of the elements or the diagram itself and get some property information. It'll take me right to Prolaborate. In this case, it's going to, since I'm already logged into Prolaborate, it's going to use my credentials and allow me to do whatever I have access to based on my user credentials and what access profile I belong to. So that's great. There's the specific information about that particular element. I can get to its properties, etc. Let's go back to Confluence. I'm going to go ahead and actually just say go to Prolaborate and open up the diagram there, and there it is. And I can see it in Prolaborate and participate in discussions. Again, given the proper access rights, I can do whatever I'm allowed to do within Prolaborate. So that's using the plugin capabilities. And again, I won't do it for SharePoint at this point, but rest assured that it's the same sort of plugin for SharePoint where you have, the app that's available. You embed, you put it into the diagram, select the diagram, or put it on your page, select the diagram that you want to represent on that page, and it'll bring it in there accordingly. And similar sort of configuration for that. All right, let's go to our next slide, our next scenario. And that's going to be sharing using an app. In this case, we're going to use Microsoft Teams as our example. Again, it's going to be, the problem of copying and pasting is going to be, mitigated here with this solution. So again, getting started, you will require a Prolaborate installation, and then you'll also need to install the app and configure it within Teams. So let's go ahead and try that out. I'm going to open up Teams here. Actually, I do have it already open. I've created a Teams group here, so we can play around with actually sharing it within a channel. But how do we get the Prolaborate plugin available here? Well, we first have to go back to Prolaborate itself, and we'll again use the portal integration access management. And of course, here we have MS Teams and a similar sort of configuration where we set up a name, the application ID, and so forth to be able to then have the plugin within, or the app within Teams be available to the users to be able to do that the embedding of the content there. All right, so let's go back to Teams, and where do we find that? We can go to the Add an Apps option here, and then we can just sort of search for Prolaborate, and there it is. If I open that, it'll allow me to go ahead and install it. I can install it in specific environments that I want, etc., which I've already done. So it's already there, but this is how you'd get it into your environment. Then once it's in your environment, then you can start using it. So for example, here I have a channel in my Teams here. I'm going to go ahead and start a post. You see I've deleted a couple of them, but I'm going to start another post. In this case, I'm going to give a subject, so please review this diagram, and then I will if I remember how to do this. And there it is. So it's a plus down at the bottom here. In this case, there's a number of different apps. I can search for it, or I can see it right here as Prolaborate. So now it's going to give me the similar sort of search capability for looking for diagrams. In this case, I'm going to again go to that billing system. It found it, and then it puts it in there. Post that. It doesn't show the diagram, but it opens it up in Prolaborate. So I can say, please review this diagram. It'll open it up in Prolaborate and allow the users to interact with it and participate in things like a discussion or a review process, again, based on their credentials and ability to and profiles that they belong to. If they are just if it's just like a view only sort of interaction where they don't have a full set of access credentials here, they would just be able to see the diagram, and they would have not much more interactions with it than just visually seeing it. But then you can have them back in Teams, give their feedback, etc., because that's where the dialogue is taking place. So again, it's looking at what will work for users to find and present the information to them in the environment that they're currently residing in. For knowledge management, Confluence and SharePoint being a couple of popular sites. For collaboration or sharing information back and forth amongst a team or a set of groups of people, using it, using the using app, share app within Teams is a good way to do that. You can also do it within chats. So if I go to a chat within here, I'm going to go ahead and say I've got a meeting going, let's say, and I want to go ahead and add another diagram to this meeting for people to look at. Look at this. Oops, I'm looking for not the billing system. There we go. And again, it's going to not put a picture of the diagram, but rather have a link to it. And then I can say, please, review this. Let me know what you think. and then whoever's on that, in this case, a meeting, they would all get this information and be able to then navigate to Prolaborate and look at the diagram. And then, again, depending on what sort of access rights they have, they may or may not be able to follow a discussion in here, but rather they could continue that discussion within Teams, but having seen the information there. And again, any changes or updates that you're making in Sparx, if I made a change and they followed that link again, let's give that a try. So I'm going to go back to Sparx, make a change to the billing app. I'm just going to, again, just a layout change to make it look obvious. If I go back to Teams and relaunch that, they're going to see the updates and changes to it. So again, I just switched these, the Legend and the Payroll app, flipped them from one side to the other. So the diagram is always going to be current. It's always going to be exactly what you have currently updated within Sparx. There's no reason to copy and paste yet another diagram into the Teams channel or the Teams chat for them to look at, and it will be stale. It'll always be fresh. So those are the few things that I think are helpful for sharing information to both SharePoint, Confluence, and Microsoft Teams. Let's take a look at a couple other options that kind of are a little bit beyond the scope of today's talk, but I just think we have a little bit of time that we can go ahead and at least mention them. And that is this concept of aggregation and syncing. Now, this does not require Prolaborate per se, and it's more of a problem to deal. The problem tends to be more of an import-export, where you're, trying to coordinate and synchronize between different external systems. And applications that are supported are things like HP's Application Lifecycle Management, Jira, Jazz, which has changed its name, Polarian, ServiceNow, Azure DevOps, and many other types of, and again, Peter Leiber's talk, he gave a good kind of overview slide of what sort of additional integrations are part of this capability. Getting started, of course, you would need to have ProCloud Server installed and configured to be able to connect to those external data sources. And then within Sparx EA, you use the external data source capabilities and then connect to those data sources and then start bringing in that content. And then the last one, of course, is custom integration. And again, Peter Leiber's slide, he does a good job of describing what this could be, but it includes things like the OSCL RESTful API layer, which allows you to explore, query, retrieve, and update information in EA via an all-new API based on the OSCL interface. Again, getting started for this requires, ProCloud Server installation and configuration, and then potentially development teams in your organization to do the development of those scripts and integration interfaces and so forth, or using a service organization like ourselves, Sparx Systems or North America, or any of the other similar groups across the globe can help you kind of work on this sort of integration. All right. Any questions or comments?
So, Steve, we do have a few questions coming in from the audience. So
Okay.
let me go ahead and bring some of those up. The first one is, does Prolaborate need a separate user ID with read and write access to embed a model in SharePoint?
It needs to have a user ID that has the ability to read and write to the SharePoint site. So oftentimes we'll create like a systems integration account that has the sufficient access credentials and privileges to be able to do that. You can use individual users, but again, we tend to kind of say have a dedicated user account for that purpose.
Okay, and does it require a separate user ID within Prolaborate as well
That I'm
to connect?
not sure. I don't think it consumes a license, but I'll have to get back to you on that.
Okay, so on that, we'll take that and transfer that one over to the Slack channel and follow up on it there. The next question, can you share dashboards via the integrations?
Currently, there is no way to do the dashboards, which is unfortunate because you can do it. Well, here I can even display a little bit of what I'm talking about. Um, in Sparx, I had a set of dashboards, or I created a Sparx model dashboard. Let me just, where I said I wanted to, in my T applications, I just wanted to say, show me their application status, or show me its complexity, or just give me a list of them here in a form of a dashboard within Sparx. So it's a diagram, it's a dashboard diagram within Sparx, and then within Prolaborate, that same diagram is available in Prolaborate, but it's not as good as a regular dashboard that you'd have in Prolaborate. And I'll show you the compare and contrast that. And what you could share in um, Confluence or SharePoint would be the Sparx diagram dashboard as opposed to the actual dashboard here. But this is where this will hopefully help, get people to be excited about using Prolaborate as opposed to SharePoint or Confluence to do their interactions with this sort of content. So if I go to the dashboard here that I have from Sparx, it's just a diagram, like we just saw, but these are just elements on there with the graphs and the table, the pie chart, etc. So they're not interactive. You just click on them and it's the properties of that element, as opposed to a dashboard of similar style. So again, it starts off here with a chart or table, or excuse me, a chart, bar chart regarding the status, and the same thing with the complexity, and then a table of those elements. The thing that's nice about this is that in addition to having it set to one attribute, I can also select another attribute to change it to a different meaning. So in this case, it's like application type, not by its status, but by its type. Or if I want to go environment, where is it, that attribute, and get my count. Same thing over here in my dashboard, my Sparx dashboard, I can only select one attribute at a time. Here, I can switch between attributes to be able to give me, multiple views of the data um, in a single widget. So in the environment here, you'd only be able to then, let's see, we'll pull one in. I'll edit this. And I'll bring in that dashboard. And we're going to go, actually, I want to do it in Confluence where I can use the plugin, not just link and embed. So yeah, unfortunately, there's no way to bring in dashboards. So hopefully that'll be something that'll be, and it's an enhancement that um, we've requested for a couple of our clients as something to be put on the backlog for the improvement for additional um, updates to Prolaborate. So hopefully it'll be in the not too distant
Okay, great.
future.
So we'll
Yeah.
we'll follow up with the development team on that to see where that's at. Um, the next question we have is also related to Confluence, which is, In Confluence, is there a way to hide the basic attributes so just the diagram shows?
Oh, these basic, yeah, there is, but I keep forgetting exactly how to do it. So I will find that out and then follow up and put that in the Slack. Yeah, because there's the configuration certainly has the ability to hide or show the child tables. Let's see if undoing all those does anything. Yeah, it still has the basic
Oh,
attributes.
it
So
looks
there
like
must
it's
be like a configuration setting that will either enable or disable that, or allow you to even put
okay.
different
Well,
information in there. So, yep. So we'll follow up with that in the Slack.
okay, great. That looks like we made it to the end of the questions for today. So let me go ahead and share, and we'll go over the final housekeeping items. Just a second, we're waiting for the platform to. As we're bringing, I'd like to thank everyone for joining today, and thanks to Steve for a really great presentation. And I know this is two of our more popular today. Recordings will be put on the website and the YouTube channel. And if you'd like to call Steve, you can reach out to your Sparx account team or email sales@sparxsystems.us, and we will be happy to set that up for you. The next section will begin in approximately 15 minutes with Chris Armstrong about REST APIs within the platform. So this is some capability for people who are trying to do API modeling, and some of the that are available there. So see the registration link in your email to join that session. So again, thank you everyone for taking the time to join today, and we look forward to seeing you on the next session of the EA Global Summit. Have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.